everyone and to all. Welcome back to another episode of Capital Interns. Our podcast essentially helps high school students and freshmen and sophomore post-secondary students to discover the career path that's right for them.
Today's guest is quite unique. He studies global business and digital arts at the University of Waterloo, currently works as a product designer. He's also a freelance photographer and art director.
So, he was actually my first friend back in high school when I moved into Canada, and we had a really fun time during media arts class where we did some really wacky designs. And he was also known as the Instagram influencer of our grade because of his photography account, which had over 2,000 to 3,000 followers at the time. So I want to introduce my friend Greg. Hey Greg, how are you today?
Not too bad. Quite an introduction. How are you doing, Rafid and Arena?
Pretty good.
I'm doing super well. I just discovered new things about you and Rafid. I did not know, Rafid, that he was your first friend.
Yes, my first friend in grade 9. Well, my first new friend in grade 9.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Yeah, it was gym class. I think it was gym class, right?
I thought it was English, to be honest.
Or it was English in the morning.
Could have been. All I remember is we had a class together in that one classroom that has no windows, one of the ones that was on the corner of Earl.
I moved into Canada. I knew no one. So Greg was literally my first friend ever that I made at Earl. So,
and friends ever since. That's super awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
And of course, thank you for being on the podcast. Super excited for the audience to get to know you. On today's episode, we will be discussing Greg's journey in global business and digital arts, his semester abroad in Hong Kong, some of his amazing design projects, and his role as a product designer. So Greg, first question, what is global business and digital arts at Waterloo?
It's a 4-year program at the University of Waterloo with a mandatory internship, or a co-op, I guess, during one of the summers. A semester abroad is also an option that's encouraged by the school. It's really in the name, global business and digital arts, so I have a lot of classes that involve business and marketing kinds of things, as well as project management. And then the digital art side of it, there's some videography and graphic design, but it's a lot of, UX and UI design too. And it's actually on Waterloo's satellite campus in Stratford right now. So the first year currently is in Waterloo and the last 3 are in Stratford. When I started, it was first 2 in Waterloo and last 2 in Stratford.
Oh my god, so cool. So you got to be in 2 different cities.
Yes.
Which one was your favorite?
I guess it depends. Waterloo is, a lot more happening than Stratford. It has a lot of things to do if you're a student, and a lot of students in general. But once you have an established group of friends, I guess, and you find a place to live in Stratford's quite nice. It's a lot more quiet and small towny, but it's still a really nice area, and I like it a lot.
When I think of Stratford, I think of theater.
Yes, there's.
Yeah.
It is a huge theater place.
Yeah, it is. It's a very artsy, I guess, small town, for lack of a better word.
What are the theaters like? Do you guys know?
So, I was gonna go to the theater this, theater season. I don't know what they specifically refer to it as, but everything kind of got canceled because of the pandemic, so I did not have an opportunity, and I have not yet had an opportunity to go. Because last year was my first year living in Stratford for my program.
Right. How did you find out about your program from high school?
I was really interested in digital arts of sorts. Even when I did photography, a lot of what I ended up doing with my photos was bordering on just digital art and cutting and mashing photos together. And I wasn't really sure specifically what career photography and graphic design could involve without having a business, an understanding of business. It was pretty much the first thing that came up on Google when I searched up business and digital art. Yeah. So that's how I first heard of it. Not through any school fairs or anything like that, just through Google. And then I researched it a bit before I applied.
Were you the only person in grade 12 to apply to that program, or was it popular?
In my high school in Earl, I think I was the only one to apply. I don't know. No one else ended up going. If anybody else applied, yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember anyone else going to that program. Mm-hmm. So here's a funny story, okay, about me and Greg in, I think, grade 9 business class. Okay, Greg would be the type of guy to do the weirdest drawings ever. He's the one who made meme sketches before they even existed.
Pioneer.
He was. He's the type of person to do some random shit and then make a story about it during class.
That sounds. Probably all sorts of stuff. If it's the business class I'm thinking of that was in the computer lab, Rafid, yeah, with all sorts of Scratch and Excel lessons, yeah, I probably doodled a lot during that class.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember those days.
Wasn't that one? That one wasn't a very engaging class as far as the class.
It was. It really wasn't. Mr. Monotone guy was really dry.
He wasn't the most engaging teacher I had, I guess, is one way to put it. Mr. Monotone.
Mr. Monotone was very monotone.
He was very monotone. So, Greg, especially because you were always so creative, was like digital art something you've always wanted to do?
I mean, like, I've been interested in just art in general for a while. I feel like to a certain extent, everybody is interested in like art. As like a kid, you're always like drawing and doing whatever you're doing. Digital art, I started to take a bit more of an interest in when I started photography, so it must have been around grade 9 and 10. I don't know if I necessarily always wanted to do digital art. Digital art's kind of like a broad umbrella term. So I'm not sure if it was just necessarily digital art as much as it was photography for the longest time specifically that I was interested in.
I remember like all those crazy photos you took about your Instagram, but we'll get to that a little bit later. How did you find the Waterloo culture when you got there and when school started?
It was pretty cool. My program is not huge, and in the first 2 years you have to go to Stratford once a week and there's a bus that takes you there, so it ends up being a very tight-knit program. So I made a lot of friends like right out the gate just through my program and by virtue of having to travel with them and sit on a bus with them every morning at 7 a.m. Every Friday morning at 7 a.m.
On a Friday?
Yeah.
Oh,
yep.
Brutal.
Yep. It's like a 30 to 40 minute drive to Stratford, and you were stuck in Stratford all day. So the first 2 years, that was every Friday or every Tuesday in the second year.
Why did they make you guys do that?
Because we have the satellite campus in Stratford, and it's not like tiny, but it's not big enough to support all 4 years of the program.
I see.
And they're slowly moving towards, I think, trying to do that. It is my understanding of things. But when I started, the first 2 years, you would go there once a week, and then the last 2 years, you'd go there like full time, and they've since changed it so the year directly below me now does the last 3 years full time. So it seems like they're
progressively getting better. Well,
yeah, just slowly moving it all to Stratford. But I guess just because I had to spend so much time with these people, I made a lot of friends in the program pretty much right away. And I think once you have some friends to go out with and do stuff in Waterloo's a lot of fun. It's pretty much just a university town. It's like Waterloo, Laurier, Conestoga College. So yeah, once you've made friends and you go out and about, there's always stuff to do depending on what you want to do.
What were some of your, most interesting courses that you took in that program?
So, I mean, last semester, I took a course that was mostly about exploring problem spaces. And we were, the final project for the course was to be entered in a contest called Map the System. So the entire course was like working towards a submission for this Map the System contest. I thought it was pretty interesting. I like the idea of not actually like trying to find a solution for a problem right off the bat, but actually taking the time to like understand how the problem exists and like why it exists and like what I guess facilitates this problem and how can it be addressed before you just jump into like starting to design a solution. I found a lot of my earlier courses, the solution was I guess kind of baked in to the project itself. So it was like, okay, pick a problem and design an app to solve it. So I like the courses that are a bit more open-ended in that regard.
Yeah, what were some of the biggest challenges you had that you encountered with those with your courses or overall with the university?
There was certainly like a period of time where I was a bit confused as to what I wanted to do after I got into university. Like I mentioned, I kind of went into this program with the mindset of like, oh yeah, I'm going to be, going to do some digital art and some photography and some business. And then, a semester or two in, I was kind of just like, I'm pretty interested in UX design. That's what a few of my courses have been about, and this is really cool to me. And I guess when I like learn about new areas, I like to just like kind of go in head first, and sometimes like other things are just like pushed to the side. So there was a period of time where I was definitely just like, I still want to do photography, but like I know that if I just like commit to learning about UX, I'm gonna like super put it on the back burner. I mean, like, I guess like 3 years later, I found how to balance both of them and manage my time better. But at the time, there was definitely like an initial period of confusion as to where do I want to go.
Speaking of UX, I know there's always confusion between UI and UX. Do you want to explain the difference?
Like, I guess like I also had a bit of confusion about that when I first started, especially since I was just kind of thrown into UX design, because I didn't know what it was before I entered school, before I entered Waterloo GBDA. Oftentimes the two are kind of lumped together, and a lot of the roles that you'll see, like for positions involving user experience design and user interface design, involve both of them, like my current job does. But UX is user experience design and UI is user interface design. And in more broad terms, UX is the actual experience someone may have with like a product or a service, for example, like a website or an app. And you can think like user flows, journey maps, stuff like that. And UI is the actual interface that the user has to deal with. So think of like graphic design and colors and fonts and typography and stuff like that. There's a lot of different terms like UX designer, UI designer, you have like content designer, all sorts of different things like this. And all of these different jobs can kind of be a part of one larger position, or if you're in a big company, maybe separate from one another.
Yeah, it's sort of like an umbrella.
Yeah, kind of, but like there's like categories within categories, but sometimes they're not like that. Sometimes it's just like really like it's just like a title, and it's like kind of just like
yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering, UX is more so like telling the story of a product, right?
Yeah, so I guess like user experience UX is telling the story, I guess you could say. Yeah, like how are these people going to like move through, I guess, like go through the process of like actually using this? Like what steps are they going to have to take, and how can we make this as smooth as possible? And then UI, I guess, again, in like a very broad sense, is like how can we like facilitate this journey with like a very nice interface? Because UI on its own, like user interface, just because you have a nice interface, it doesn't inherently lend itself to like a good experience using something if everything is in a really janky order or whatever.
What would you have liked to know about university before you went?
What would I have liked to know about university before I went? Probably I would have, I guess, I probably would have just liked to know that I would have liked to know not to hold myself to, I guess, some of the same standards that I did in high school from like I guess like a grades perspective. I know that in high school I was not exactly like super duper academic, but like I had standards for myself, and I found that in university I tried to hold myself to those same standards for a while at first, and doing that is just really unhealthy. You're not going to get the same grades you do in university that you get in high school. Over the last 3 years in university, I've started putting a lot less emphasis on like actual numbered grades for myself, and I've actually found that I end up doing better in classes when I do that.
Less pressure, right?
Yeah, less pressure.
Yeah.
I find like the standards I set for myself in high school, from like a strictly not just like what did I learn from this class, but like I got an 80, I got an 85, whatever. I found like I carried that over into university, and even when I did well in my university classes, I'd still get kind of down on myself about it, because it's like, well, when I did this kind of project in high school, whatever. So I've kind of learned that number grades aren't really actually that important for me. I know that that's not the case for everybody, but personally, and even if they are important for you in terms of your co-op, it shouldn't be a reflection of what you've learned. That's I think one of the worst things you can do is treat number grades as if they're a reflection of what you learned. I can like breeze through a class and get like a 90 sometimes, and sometimes I'll like put my soul into a project and come out with like a 70 on it. And I guess just not to put your worth in your grades is a good way of putting it.
Definitely, I do agree with that, because in the end, like when you actually go to the actual workplace, you're going to be getting constant feedback anyways, and you're going to be working with tons of other people who are smart, who could even be even smarter than you, or who can even like have more experiences that they would love to share with you, right? Like, I'm a huge advocate of, I think I remember I did a speech back in high school. Like your grades don't necessarily mean happiness.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember when part of that speech, I talked about how there is like amazing CEOs, right? Like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was like dropped out of university before he even started. I think it was the case, or he was like in his program in liberal arts in like some no-name college, and then afterwards he dropped out, like a couple like months or probably a year later. But like I remember that that like these types of people like did so well. And Sir Winston Churchill, fun fact, he was the dumbest kid in his class, and he became the most. He wasn't just the dumbest kid in the class. He was the worst kid in English in his class as well, and he became one of the most influential like leaders in political history. So just goes to show you that like your grades and your school performance doesn't necessarily dictate of how successful you'll be in life. And I remember what someone told me is that your success is dictated by how you shape your life, right? So I'm a huge advocate for that, and I'm glad you brought that up, Greg, because I fully think that grades do not reflect whatsoever your outcome of life, because in the end, a number on a piece of sheet of paper from school is not going to dictate the rest of your life.
Yeah, I've certainly started feeling like a lot better about myself and my performance in classes since I stopped, I guess, measuring my academic success by number grades and started doing so by, I guess, like making notes of like what I had learned in a class. So like even if I get like a 70 in a class, if there's something I can take away from it and I know I've learned from it, then that's fine by me. Like, that's okay.
I like that you bring that up. You know, sometimes I think there's like a contrast between things you've learned and the grade that you get, because sometimes we're so focused on trying to get those A pluses, and then when you finish the course, you kind of think back about what you learned, but you don't really remember because it was more about getting your grade than learning something new.
It's definitely much better to like go into a course in the presence of like you want to actually learn the material and actually understand the material, rather than just like, you know, get the grade and move on. Like there's obviously going to be some classes that are dry, you just want to get the grade and move on, like that's inevitable. But there's some classes that are
like mechanics.
yeah exactly, like us software engineers, no mechanics please. But there is some other like courses that are a lot more interesting, like for example object-oriented programming or something like that like you shouldn't care about the grades too much. You should mostly focus on like what you learn. And I think that's what my dad told me like in university. He told me like don't focus on like what you get in your numbers. I want to like see you actually learn something, and you can actually like talk to someone in depth and technical knowledge of the topic, because that will be much more valuable than what a number is on a piece of paper.
I mean, like even the dry courses, I guess there's things to take away from them, and I usually try to do that as well. I think it might not necessarily, like for example, if I have like a marketing course that's just not up my alley and I can't, you know, convince myself to get into the content, I think there's still takeaways from it that aren't necessarily like about the marketing. So if I have to write a report, maybe I can just use it as an opportunity to practice my report writing skills. In general, just having this course and the workload for it like exist alongside my other courses that I'd rather prioritize serves as like a task in organization and like prioritizing things. So there's even just like soft skills you can take away from things without necessarily being absolutely in love with the content itself.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely do agree with that. Speaking towards your high school experience in terms of academics, was it easy to get grades that you needed to get into your program?
I would definitely say that, I guess, as a whole, I probably had an easier time in high school than some kids did, just because my courses weren't, you know, like chemistry or like any of like the traditionally academic like science and maths courses. I had a lot of business and arts courses because that's just what I took more interest in. So I probably had an easier time than a lot of people, if I'm being honest. I still worked because I still, again, had like standards that I wanted to, I guess, achieve for myself. Standards that I wanted to meet for myself, rather. But it certainly wasn't like sleepless nights, stuff like that.
I remember that we thoroughly enjoyed debate class for international business. That was
oh my goodness, yeah. I forgot about that.
That was so hype. I remember that. We carried our team. I remember that we had to carry our team.
Wow. Yeah, that's something that I actually did not remember up until like right now.
Man, we were talking about tariffs, right, and all that. I remember stuff
Yeah,
like that.
we were.
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
were.
I remember I studied so hard for that debate.
Oh yeah, we had a debate on protectionism.
Yeah. And I remember like you were winging it, and then I actually did research beforehand. So then we combined forces to like dominate the other team. Yeah, that was fun. That was a really fun class. Right now, we're gonna do a little bit of a game, and I don't know if you know about this game. It's called Rapid Fire Round, and what it is that you have to be quick and think on your feet.
So we're gonna ask you a couple of questions, and for each question, you have 5 seconds to answer it. Does that make sense?
It's like, think of it like fast prototyping.
We believe in you. We believe in you, Greg.
Okay.
Greg's reaction is like, I'm done.
Greg just fell back in his chair. He's like, I'm done.
Who's your biggest inspiration in life?
Probably an artist like Tom York or someone like that who is able to create art and also fight for the things he believes in.
Nice.
So cool. What's at the top of your bucket list?
Probably live in the UK, like Scotland or Edinburgh for a bit.
Cool.
Describe what happiness means to you in 3 words.
Happiness. 3 words? I'm taking longer than 5 seconds to think about this. I'm sorry.
All right, time's up.
Time's up.
But,
Yeah.
but tell
Tell
us
us.
anyways. Tell us anyways.
I don't know if I can in 3 words.
Think of like things that make you happy. Like, is it like gummy bears or something?
That's 2 words.
Oh, you're
I
right.
don't know. Probably like doing what I love or something like that. Oh, that's not 3, but you know, doing what love, doing I love. I don't know.
How about loving my work?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, that would certainly be a part of it.
Next question. What's your biggest pet peeve? Time's up.
Probably just being like late.
Being late?
Like myself being late. I hate when I'm late to things, and I like try to avoid it so often. Rafid, you sent me an email and you're like, "Be here at 9
God.
earlier, not later." Right before this, and I was like, "I gotta be in here 5 minutes." I was like at my computer, and I was just like, I got that email, and I was like, "Oh." No.
Rafid, you scared
Dude,
Greg.
I knew Greg was gonna. I knew Greg was going to come earlier, so that's why I sent that email. Because I'm
Oh,
like,
I see.
not earlier, not later. Come exactly at 9.
Oh,
Like
man.
I don't like when like I guess like a plan is made and then somebody is just like super late for it without any like word of caution or warning.
Oh, I hate that too.
And as a result, I'm just like very conscious about me doing it even by like a single minute. Like I really try to just be like 5 minutes. Like if I'm not like 5 minutes early, I feel like I'm late most of the time.
Are you though? I feel like you're very punctual since you think about it.
I guess. I don't know. I try not to think about it and I just show up early.
Man, Greg was great about like sending us like the forms and everything.
Really?
Like 3 days earlier. He was like, I don't think I can send it
Don't
on
remind
time.
me. I owe you guys a photo of me still.
Oh my god.
Oh yeah,
I
we
just
still
haven't
need the photo.
Yeah, we still need
It's
that.
no, okay. That one is because I don't take photos of myself. I think the most
Oh.
recent actual photo I have of me is like great.
Is that
Wait,
okay? Is
so-
that a common thing among photographers? They don't like taking pictures of themselves, but they take pictures of other things.
I don't think so. I mean, like, I don't really know why. Like, I'm like, if someone's like, "Hey, let me take a photo of you," I'm not gonna be like, "Oh no," like, go ahead, like, if
okay.
you want to. But I don't like actively seek out like an opportunity
Right.
to get my photo taken. I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question related to that. I know on your LinkedIn profile, your picture is like kind of blurry. I don't know if that's an artistic thing or just.
Oh, so that is so in one of my classes last semester, I guess, so in like January or whatever, one of my profs was using different people's LinkedIns in our class as an example of like what to do and what not to do. We sent this prof our LinkedIns. It wasn't just
Right,
like, they
right.
were just like open, like roasting people. And she pulls mine up and like the content on my LinkedIn, she was like, "This is what you should do." And then the next one was mine again. She was like, "Don't do this photo." And it was that photo of me with like blowing like a bubble.
Oh
I was like,
my
"Oh."
god.
So I was like, I instantly just like I was like trying to change it, and I didn't actually have any photos of me. And the closest thing I had to a photo of my face was a cropped black and white photo from when I went to a cottage with a bunch of my friends the last summer.
Oh my god!
So I was just like, this is gonna do.
Yo, Greg, honestly, can we please use the bubblegum photo? I love that photo so much.
It sounds like a cool photo.
I can. You want me to send it to you? I can send it.
It's
to you.
really nice quality.
Like, I have nothing wrong.
Is it?
Yeah, it is.
It reminds me of a Post Malone music video, like the thumbnail. Right? Like it's old school ones.
Yeah, I'll send you the original file for that one so you can use it. That actually takes a lot of pressure off me in deciding which old photo to send you. So you know what?
Please not the blurry one. Next question. What's the first thing you grab in the morning?
First thing I grab in the morning, probably coffee.
I seriously thought it was going to be the phone, but that's good to know.
I mean, if I'm being very realistic, it would be my glasses.
Yeah, that's true. Oh yeah. Greg wears glasses.
What's the top song on your phone right now?
Right now? Well, last year it was Dawn Course by Tom York. But probably something Radiohead at this point.
Cool. Where is the one place you would want to travel that you haven't visited?
Probably Japan.
Wow, so fast.
Oh, wow.
That was the last question. Alright, back to some serious questions. How did you get your internship as a product designer, and where do you work at right now?
So I work for the Ontario Digital Service, so for the provincial government. I got my internship, well, it's a mandatory co-op for my program, for GBDA. So I ended up applying through Waterloo Works. I went through that whole, anyone who goes to Waterloo knows Waterloo Works. It's basically the, I guess, system for pairing students with companies. I got an interview on the first day of interviews, and it was my only interview, and it was for the ODS, the Ontario Digital Service, and I went in and I interviewed, and that's pretty much how I got it. I know that I was supposed to do it remotely because I live in Stratford and the interviews were in Waterloo, but then my academic advisor told me I had to go do it in person, so I took an Uber from Stratford to Waterloo, and then I got to Waterloo and I went into the career center, and I was like, I'm here for my interview, and they're like, oh, but you're from GBDA? That means you live in Stratford. You can just do it remotely. And I was like, well, I just drove here for it. And they're like, no, you can do it remotely. We'll set you up with a room. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I went in, I sat down, I did my interview over video call from this room in the career center on Waterloo campus. And then I walk out of the room I did it in, and from 3 doors down, the people I just interviewed with were there. And I was like, are you kidding me?
What?
Are you kidding? So I spent the collective that day there and back, I spent $70
$70, eh?
Ubers just to because it's like a 30 to 40 minute drive from Stratford to Waterloo and back. So, and then again back. So, I guess a miscommunication, but that's how I got my job. It was the only interview I got, and it ended up being good. A lot of the interviews towards the end of things started to get canceled because that's when COVID started to make its way into Canada.
Was it hard going through the process of finding a job?
It wasn't necessarily the most difficult thing in the world. It's not easy, not to be oh yeah, it was a breeze. No, it's stressful to think that I need a job this summer, because not only do I need to make money to pay for things next year when I actually get groceries and whatever, but also I want the experience, and also it is literally required for my degree. So there's some stress. But the actual process of using Waterloo Works and looking for a job, it's more arduous than anything, because you're basically just repackaging resumes and cover letters for a bunch of different companies, and you're sending them out, and it's just a lot of work at once, as opposed to being complicated, I guess. I for sure. Looking for a co-op is always stressful. Rafiq can tell us.
Oh man, I hate job hunting so much. No one likes it.
It's stressful.
No.
Yeah, it's stressful. I find it's more stressful and arduous than it actually is difficult. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that does make sense.
And so also you're bouncing a bunch of courses as well at the same time, plus extracurriculars.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also, all the emails from Waterloo Works I got at first went to my spam folder on my Waterloo email address of all emails. So the first time for the interview, I got an email for it, apparently days in advance, and then I logged into Waterloo Works 2 days before it was supposed to happen, and it was yeah, are you coming to this? And I was coming to what? And they were the interview. And I was huh?
God.
And I checked through my spam, and I saw invites to the interview, and I was oh my god, okay.
You got lucky. That could have gone way worse.
Everything worked out in the end.
So, I want you to talk about more so like your role as a product designer. What is a product designer? And also, on top of that, as a follow-up question, what sort of work does the product designer actually do?
I guess the role of a product designer could encompass a lot of other roles or I guess like titles or names, like when we were talking about UX and UI, I suppose. So, a product design includes like user experience design. It could include like interaction design, interface design, things like this. And it is really a lot of user experience design, but with a focus on balancing the needs of the user and the needs of a business, as opposed to user experience design, where it generally, and again, there's like overlap all over the place, but where user experience design is generally more so like focusing specifically on the actual journey that a user takes. Product design is also weighing the needs and the goals of the business when you're doing UX design. So like, for example, if I'm building an online portal, for example, and the business I'm working with has a goal of, I guess, reducing manual work for their back end, and then all the people I'm talking to are like, we want a live chat. We can't do that because that does not align itself with the goals that the business is doing. But how can I like give users the benefit of, I don't know, having something similar to a live chat without actually like going against the goals that the business has laid out or what they are trying to achieve themselves? It's a balancing act, I guess. In terms of the work, I mean, like, I need to make sure that this hypothetical portal I'm talking about follows like an easy user flow and has the features needed by users without eating into the business's goals. It also needs to look good, so it's like UX, it's UI. The information needs to be organized and laid out in a way that's easy to understand, so it's like content design and information architecture. So I'm always conducting interviews and testing sessions with users, with stakeholders. I'm presenting findings to stakeholders and executives. I'm doing like service blueprints, journey maps, user personas, and then I'm actually doing a lot of iterative design. So testing one day and then modifying the wireframes the next day, and then testing again the next day, and then modifying the wireframes the next day. More recently, towards the end of the engagement I'm working on right now, I'm working pretty closely with some developers to create a coded prototype so we can test not just how people go through these screens as like a user flow, but also how they actually interact with them, so we can look at all the different, I guess, like micro interactions and stuff like that as well. It really varies day to day what I could be doing.
That sounds cool though.
Speaking about like when you're mentioning you were asking, for example, stakeholders questions, what sort of questions do you usually ask during user interviews?
So user interviews or stakeholder interviews, or like both, I guess.
Oh, sorry, user interviews. When we learned stakeholders, we learned that like users are also stakeholders, but I think that's a little bit different from the terminology that you use.
Yeah. I mean, that is certainly like a viable way of looking at it, but I guess in this sense, stakeholders would be like the actual like people in the business that I'm designing something for, or in this case, people from different program areas within the government. And I mean, I guess you don't have to, but we like to do stakeholder interviews before user interviews a lot of the time, because doing a lot of stakeholder interviews and talking to stakeholders who work in different parts of the business or the government can start to help paint a picture of, I guess, what you're dealing with and the problem space that you're working within. And that way you have a bit of information and a bit of understanding as to where you're working before you go talk to users, as opposed to just jumping into an interview with a real end user and trying to identify problems when you don't actually know anything about the environment you're working in. So we'll talk to stakeholders and we'll start to build up some like very preliminary journey maps and service blueprints, for example, depending on what project we're working on. And then these are all based off what stakeholders tell us. And then we'll identify, I guess, what assumptions we're making and what knowledge gaps we have. And then by understanding that, we're able to, I guess, script an interview where we address all of these different things and then talk to users about this kind of stuff. And it generally comes down to talking about, what pain points do they have, like what facilitates these pain points, their actual experience with, the existing service or program or whatever is in place that we're looking to fix, so that we have some understanding as of like what their experience level is, right? There's obviously people of different ranges of tech savviness, I guess. So all sorts of things like that, I guess.
What sort of skill set do you need to have to fully understand the requirements that users need?
Empathy and being a good listener are pretty important, I'd say. I think that if it's an area people get passionate about, they're gonna want to, talk. They're gonna want to talk to you. And sometimes they might even get off track, and you're gonna need to be able to kind of bring them back on track without being rude or interjecting, or without like, explicitly being like, hey, you're losing the scope of this interview. You kind of need to reel them back in sometimes. And that's like very doable if you've just like turned on your active listening, and you can ask, intelligent questions based off what they've been telling you. So you can kind of direct the conversation to get the information that you want from them without just, pulling them around and being like, okay, tell me this, tell me that. It can feel more like a conversation. And for people who might be less passionate about the specific, project that you're working on, for example, if I'm designing like an alternative to Microsoft Word, people might not exactly be super like emotionally invested in it, but they still have needs that they're going to want met. So you need to be able to dig deeper and extrapolate based on what they're telling you, so you can understand their needs, because they might not be as quick to just lay it all out there like some people could be if you're dealing with something that's a bit more close to home.
Pro tips right here.
Yeah. Greg, the product design expert.
Yeah,
Start your own
I
course.
certainly wouldn't go that far. I have a lot to learn.
Yeah, because empathy and active listening, honestly, you'll need that in any workplace, because you work with teammates.
Yeah, that's what I've found increasingly the more I've like worked in, for lack of a better term, real jobs, quote unquote. Like jobs like, I guess, within the government or within like not just like a retail position. Not that there's nothing wrong with that. Is that a lot of the soft skills that you kind of like write off initially are actually some of the skills that end up being the most important. So it sounds like really cliche to say that like, oh, you need to be a good listener and you need to be organized to be good in this field. And it's like, yeah, like that's the same for every field, but it's like, it truly is some of the most important things you can have, or traits you can possess.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. So, especially like you were talking about, more so about, having empathy for the people you work with and who you talk to. How is like your overall like day-to-day job now that you're working remotely? Has that changed at all, and has that become more difficult?
Well, a lot of my work is digital anyways right now. I work for the Ontario Digital Service. I'm not exactly like an extrovert, but I still do like working with people in person, so that's certainly changed. I would say that all things considered, it's been quite smooth. Probably the biggest, I guess, issue or problem is when it comes to like user testing or user interviews and talking to people and finding people to talk to. We can't, exactly go out to a physical spot and ask random people to test certain apps and do like, I guess, like guerrilla testing like that. So we need to actually reach out to people through the internet. And when you're designing digital services with the intentions of them being accessible to everyone, it can be problematic if the sample of users you have meets like this baseline tech savviness because they're on the internet, right? Like you have to use Zoom to talk to us in a user interview or something like that. So there's like almost like a bar of entry right now when it comes to being able to conduct user testing. So you have to be very, I guess, cognizant that there is people who are a lot lower tech that you can't test with right now because they just might not be like, on the internet looking for a screener to fill out to, try to test a new product or whatever out.
What would you say is the most challenging part of your job right now?
To be honest, probably what I mentioned above now is just trying to take all of that into account and making sure that the design decisions that we're making aren't just good for the people that we're testing with, but for the people that we might not be able to reach.
Yeah, that makes sense. But if you were in the office, would it be different?
I mean, I guess that wouldn't be as much of an issue with, pandemic out of the situation. I don't know if this is necessarily like a challenging part of my job, but there's a lot to learn that I've been learning the last 4 months. So there's just I feel like I'm like simultaneously like not necessarily taking a course, but like learning a whole whack of stuff while also like working in like a very fast-paced work environment. So not necessarily challenging, but like sometimes it's like a lot to keep up with, I guess.
Do you find that your degree has prepared you for that, like as your role as a product designer right now? And if so, in what way?
So in some ways, yes. In that, like, it gives me like this high level understanding of what UX is and what UI is, and has helped me, I guess, understand a bit of like the design process. Yeah, it certainly has. But like I mentioned earlier, I find that with my program, a lot of the UX projects so far have had the solutions baked into the actual project themselves. Again, like, design an app specifically to solve for this problem. And that's not really how things work. A lot of my job involves preliminary research to figure out what needs to be built and what features it needs to have before we actually go on to build it. It's a lot of discovery phase work. So yeah, it's not always as simple as just like getting on a project and knowing like, yes, it is time to build an app. It is time to build a website. You need to determine what like the best, I guess, digital delivery for the information of the service or product or whatever you're designing is. Yeah. And
there's a lot of analysis that goes behind.
Yeah, and I feel like that is something that's missing from my program. Like I said, I had a third year course that was about exploring problem spaces, and that was incredibly useful and probably should have shown up earlier in my program flow. I know they're still figuring things out in my program. There's only been like, I think, 6 graduating classes, so they're always shuffling things around, but that would be
super new.
Pretty new, yeah.
Yes, only 6, yeah. What skills do you think is important for high schoolers to adopt in order to excel in that field that you're in right now?
I kind of like what I mentioned above in terms of active listening and empathy, and otherwise probably organization. I know it's like such like a cliche, like
time management.
General, yeah, time management, stuff like that. I know it's very, wallpaper, like, oh, well, every field you need this, but it's true. Like I find that oftentimes I'm preparing screener for a test for usability testing, and then while I'm doing this, I'm actually starting to write interview scripts, and I'm doing stakeholder interviews, and I'm preparing preliminary journey maps, and I'm doing like service blueprints, and then I'm starting to interview while I design, before I test, during my tests, and then I'm working with devs, and it's like there's like a lot of overlap between these different phases. They're not like super clear cut, especially when you're working very fast, especially when you're working in the government, and sometimes there's like the constraint of, well, this thing needs to get approved. I can't just like do this without the government, giving me the big thumbs up. So being able to like balance a lot of things and being able to effectively organize the tasks you have is super important. And otherwise, like in terms of like not soft skills, just having good visual design skills and just like a fundamental understanding of like UX and UI is also, of course, important.
For sure. Those soft skills are very important.
Yeah, and especially like a great way to do this is through extracurriculars. And you've done a couple of them during your time at Waterloo. And you were on the team for Waterloop, which could you explain about that role and what Waterloop is for the audience? Yeah,
well, Waterloop is the Waterloo SpaceX team. So they're working towards like the SpaceX challenge, I guess. I forget the specific name of the competition. I was on the team for 3 months, and I was in marketing specifically, although I wasn't exactly doing like marketing or like outreach or anything like that. I was more so just like a photographer for the team. So I would do a lot of like team photos, headshots, stuff like that. I also formatted some of the reports. In terms of like what my experience was with it, I wasn't quite as busy as a lot of the engineers, as you can imagine, as the guy taking photos versus the people actually, building the pod. So it wasn't too time consuming, and it was pretty easy to manage. It was on Saturday mornings. And it was a cool environment. I can't say like I learned anything about engineering, but it just like really like, I guess, opened my eyes to like the kind of work that these people do and that they're capable of doing. I think it's like very impressive. I think any opportunity you can get to work with people outside of your discipline, especially like if you're doing like design, working with people who are like in engineering, I think it's super beneficial. And I do wish that I had longer than just the 3 months I spent with them, and that I had, I guess, had an opportunity to work my way a bit deeper into Waterloop as a whole, because I was very much so on the outside, considering I was inside Waterloop.
I mean, like you mentioned, I'm sure a lot of people on that team are from engineering. What was it like being in that environment, working with different people on that team?
A lot of words I didn't understand sometimes. It was certainly interesting. It was certainly very interesting. And like I said, when I had to like format their reports, for example, I would obviously read them, and just like it just like really opened my eyes to like how cool a lot of the stuff they do is, even if I might not have like the most holistic understanding of like the actual processes they go through to like build these things. In terms of them being from engineering, like, it wasn't like a good or bad thing. It was just like a thing. I mean, it was a good thing in that I got like a bunch of different perspectives on certain issues. Yeah, I don't really have too much to say specifically about that, I guess.
Do you think your experience with photography has had an impact on your current role as a product designer?
Yeah. the talking to people aspect probably has, believe it or not. I used to shoot events like starter hacks, I shot weddings, I shot LinkedIn headshots, and I guess like the commonality between all of those is that people are generally very uncomfortable on camera unless they're drunk. So when you like put aside the weddings, no one was drunk at starter hacks, and no one comes to the LinkedIn headshot photo shoot drunk either. So you need to like actually talk to them, and you need to get them to like open up and be comfortable around you, because when you're trying to take photos of people, especially LinkedIn headshots or any kind of headshot, and they're just like standing in front of you, people like get very tense, and it doesn't look natural. Even if they think they're looking natural, you don't look natural. So you need to like talk to them and make friends with them as you take photos of them, make them open up and feel uncomfortable. Not like open up as in like, here's my life story, but like you need to be able to trust you enough to like, let their guard down and like actually smile, right? And once you like have that, people like talking. People like talking once they're comfortable with you, and you have to be like a good listener to make sure they stay invested in what you're doing. And it's kind of the same deal for interviewing people. You need to listen to them closely, not just to like make them feel heard, but also it is a part of your job. Otherwise, beyond that, I guess photography has just led to me being visually inclined. Not visually inclined in the same way that like UX design requires, but just, I guess, attention to details. Like when I'm photoshopping a photo very closely, I'm putting two images together, I'm looking for like every single granular detail, and you have to go through screens with that like fine-tooth comb when you're, especially when it comes to like wording, for example, which isn't necessarily visual, but you know what I mean in terms of UX design. That's probably the extent to what photography influenced like product and UX design for me.
So speaking of like photo shoots, do you have any stories of some specific photo shoots you want to share with us? Like, what are some of the coolest or like the most fun photo shoots you've done, or like what are some of the most like dangerous ones you've done?
I haven't done like a proper like go out, here's a planned photo shoot in a while. I think that kind of photos I've been taking have shifted a lot recently from like stage. Well, I mean, like they're still not like candid or anything, but I take like a different kind of photo now to that what I did when I started. Like I guess like the most memorable as of late must have probably been when I was in Hong Kong. Since I mean most of the times when I went out to take photos in Hong Kong, it mostly entailed like location scouting and like wandering around with my friends. So I guess one in particular would be me and a friend of mine had woken up at like 4 a.m. to hike Lions Rock and get some photos of like the sunrise over top of the mountain, over top of the city rather, from the top of the mountain. I think if you've Googled photos of Lions Rock, you'll see how nice it is. It's very, very pretty. So we were walking up this very steep hill, and it's like pitch black, and we don't know this area of town, and we were kind of lost, and we're trying to find the trailhead that leads off from the street. And we ended up stopping and asking an older woman who was out for a walk at like 5 a.m. I guess, and she said that she was on her way up to the top of this steep road as well, and that we'd pass the trailhead so we could follow her, and she'd show us how to get to it on her way up. So we ended up like walking up this very steep hill with her for like 30 minutes, and she was just talking to us and telling us about how every morning she'd get up at like 5 or 5:30 and walk up this very steep hill. She said she was 90, which was
90
really impressive, because she was like,
holy,
breaking less of a sweat than me and my friend were. This was like a truly steep hill. And on our way up, we kept passing other older folks who were also walking up and down the hill, and we found out there's this community of older people that like to go and walk up and down this hill at like 5 in the morning to stay in shape, because no one else is out, so no one else is like using the road. It was a road, so I guess people would be driving on it during the day. I think the oldest man that we ended up meeting was 96, if I'm not mistaken.
96 years old?
Yeah, it was pretty like, because we'd always stop, like they didn't walk together, but they all like seemed to know each other, because every time we were walking with this old woman and we passed somebody else, the woman would stop and would say like, hey, how's it going? And then had fast Chinese conversations I couldn't understand. And they were all super, super nice. They like were like just like talking to us and telling us about how they would always walk up this hill. They were all just in impressive shape, seeing as like some of them were like over 95. And then we went on, we found the trailhead. We were hiking up through the forest before the sun came up at dawn, which was quite the experience, I guess, because you can hear all of the monkeys in the trees that just like kind of like scream at you from above. So they run up and around the tree branches above you, and they're just like kind of like yelling and like cackling at you, which
that's wild.
Was kind of cool, but also a bit more unsettling than it would have otherwise been, since I had just started regular visits to the hospital in Hong Kong for rabies shots after a monkey scratched me. So I was well, I don't know, but
all of that happened in Hong Kong. Crazy.
Yeah, it was really cool. Generally, I find photo shoots, the more interesting parts of photo shoots are not necessarily the actual taking pictures, but like the things that happen before and after while you're on your way there and back or whatever.
Man, Karina, those people are more of a shape than I'll ever be.
Yeah, me too, man.
Yo, 96.
I can't even walk up the stairs.
This was like I can't stress enough that this was like a very steep hill. Like 15 minutes walking up this, me and my friend were like panting, and she was just going, just like keep up. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yo, she's like okay, what's that person? Okay, who is the turtle from Kung Fu Panda? Master.
That was the small rodent creature. But
was it Master Shifu?
That was the smaller.
Oh, was it like it was Master Shifu, right?
No. That was the Master Shifu was the, I forget what animal it was specifically, but the very short, more squirrely like creature, but not a squirrel.
Yeah, that one. Yeah. I think it was Master Shifu. I wasn't sure if it was Master Shifu or the turtle one that took Po up the hill or like up the stairs or whatever. Cause like I remember he was like so super exhausted, but like he was like this guy was like what, like over 60 or 70 years old, and this guy was able to go up miles and miles, like upstairs and up a hill. Like I'm like that is literally me. That is literally me. I'm Po, and those old people are like Master Shifu or like the turtle. I forget the character names, but yeah, like that's a literal representation.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed, I must say. They were in very good shape. I found, I was just kind of like, oh my gosh, like you guys are doing this every morning. It's also like not even sunrise. I would absolutely still be sleeping.
Was it a nice sunrise?
It was. Like, ultimately, we ended up taking some nice photos. My friend almost lost his drone over the mountain. He tried flying it to get, like, aerial shots of the mountain. And I think I have a video somewhere. I've actually looked for it recently and can't find it, of him losing connection to his drone. And being like, oh, shit. And, like, trying to, like, reel it back in.
You also worked for the RCMP. What was your role?
Yeah, I was a web publisher. So pushing pages online, doing a lot of quality assurance. You're looking through a lot of links and pages and making sure everything is in working order, making sure everything is aligned with like the government's policy on like communications and federal identity, and then just HTML and CSS. It was pretty basic HTML and CSS.
So how did you find the student position in the first place?
So I found it through FSWEP, which is Federal Student Work Experience Program. Don't quote me on the actual acronym there, but I know it's FSWEP.
That is the acronym.
Is it? But yeah, so I found it through that, which is if you're looking for like your first internship, an especially good website. You basically just like put your resume in and like check off some areas of interest, and then they'll start sending it off to people that are like, I guess, programs in the government or departments in the government that they think need it. If you've ever used Waterloop Works or anything like that to find co-op through Carleton, for example, is your guys' school. It's very similar to that, actually, just not through a school.
Yeah, like I honestly think it's the best way, because I know that co-op for us doesn't open up until second year, so it's a really good way to get your first year experience, which I highly recommend. Like it is a fantastic initiative by the government.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, my first co-op came out of being in the FSWEP program. I remember I was doing like a contract there, and then when the time came to do co-op, I just asked them, can I turn it into a co-op? So I definitely recommend to take advantage of it.
I mean, I still have like my manager as like a reference, and it was just like good. It was just like good experience in terms of like working like an office job, I guess.
Yeah, like I'll just say any experience is good experience.
Truly, especially for your first job. Don't look for the perfect job for your first job.
it might not happen the first time, but who knows? It's interesting. I know some people, like during, for example, Ahmed, they just got in their first time.
Well, there's people that are just like on like another level of just like of skill, and they have just like the portfolio that like an employer would dream of like looking over. So it happens, but don't hold yourself to that standard, because that's like the 1% skilled people.
Everyone's going on their own pace, and you'll get there eventually if you put the work into it. So don't be discouraged about your first one, because it will happen eventually, as long as you keep trying.
For reference, Ahmed is from episode 2, and his first co-op was at BlackBerry QNX. That's what we were talking about. Definitely check out that episode if you want to know more.
So you got to study on a semester abroad. Do you want to explain where it was and what you learned from it?
Yeah, I studied at the City University of Hong Kong, not to be confused with the other CUHK, which is Chinese University of Hong Kong, because a lot of people confuse that. Yes, I mean, I know that towards the end of my semester when the campuses started getting protests on them, Chinese University of Hong Kong, which is abbreviated to CUHK, and City University of Hong Kong, which is abbreviated to just CityU, both had stuff going on, but Chinese University of Hong Kong had it a lot worse, and some of my academic advisors got the acronyms mixed up and were like emailing me, and
really,
like,
there's
we were
two?
reading these news articles about this, and I'm like, trust me, this is not my school. And they're like, no, we know you go to CUHK, and I'm like, I go to CityU, so don't get them mixed up. But I studied at City University of Hong Kong, specifically at CityU's School of Creative Media, or SCM, which is probably what I'll refer to it if I say it later on, just because that's, I guess, habit. What I learned in terms of the courses I took there, I took some courses that I generally didn't have as much opportunity to take in GBDA that's still related to like art kind of stuff. Some of the courses that I actually thought I would have more of a chance to take in GBDA, related to like I guess like photography and like photo installation kind of stuff like that. I also took a course in human-computer interaction, which is UX design basically. I guess like very like reductionist definition, like UX design.
Is that what it is? Because I saw that course as part of my electives, and I was always so confused. What is that?
Yeah,
now I know.
it kind of is. That's like probably like the easiest way to explain it.
So was this like study abroad program part of Waterloo, or is this like something that's required in your degree?
Well, it's not required. It was an option, so I guess that's kind of how they can justify putting the global in the global business and digital arts program name. So you have the option to go abroad in either your 3A or 4A semester, and we have capstone projects in 4A and 4B, so I wanted to do 3A.
That's smart. Less work. Was the university experience there different from what it's like at Waterloo?
Yes. I mean, I guess so. I to be honest, my workload at the school was minimal because the work I had was with classes on like photography and fine art installation and like UX, which just kind of felt like fun work. So there wasn't really any courses I had that I didn't like, because I truly got to like handpick them, as opposed to like a traditional university where you have like a structured program and you're given courses, which is, I mean, what I'm doing every other semester at Waterloo. So you know, when I'm given like a photography project and I'm going to go out and wander the city anyways, that doesn't really feel like I'm doing that much work. And I mean, on top of that, I stacked all my classes. So I had full days of classes on Monday and Tuesday, and then I effectively had a 5-day weekend.
Wow.
Which was a lot of nice. Was that even a sentence? Which was very nice. If I can rephrase that.
It is a lot of nice.
It's a lot of nice, yeah.
It wasn't a lot of nice. It was 5 days of nice, if I'm being specific. Yeah, like I learned a lot through my classes. Like school, like the school aspect itself wasn't like a write-off by any means. I still learned a lot, and it gave me a lot of opportunity to do and try new things. And the portfolio piece I ended up presenting when I was interviewing for the job I got this summer was actually from the UX course I did there.
Wow.
From the HCI course I did there. So certainly like tangible benefits that came out of like the schooling experience. But I found that a lot of what I really experienced was less so like the academic side and more so just like I was like just, you know, experiencing a new city, a new country, culture, whatever. That was like the most enjoyable part.
Was it like really easy to make friends once you got there? Because I would imagine like people from all over the world must have like come to Hong Kong to do the study abroad program.
Yeah, so I mean, I went with a couple friends of my own, so it was nice to have people there that I knew, and it also kind of allows you to go out in a group and meet new people in a group, so it's a bit, like it's a bit like almost like an icebreaker just to have someone there that and it's also like a fallback in case you meet people that you don't like, which didn't actually happen, so that's a good thing. But in general, even like that aside, there was a lot of opportunities and events for exchange students and also for local students too. I remember, like, especially towards the starting of the semester, they would like set up like almost like food stands and everything outside of the residence buildings, because the residence buildings were almost like in a horseshoe, almost circular shape.
Sounds cool. Sounds like a community, yeah. How would you compare the culture in Hong Kong versus back home?
I'm not sure how I'd compare it, to be honest. Not like off the top of my head. Like, not necessarily culture, but it was always much busier. There was always like something happening. I mean, very general things like different food, different, language, different, this, different that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna add to that. I mean, Waterloo and Ottawa are so much smaller compared to Hong Kong, right?
Very much so. Not just smaller, but less.
More condensed.
Yeah.
Less. Yeah, Hong Kong is such a dense city, so it's like really, really crazy. Also, way better public transit there in terms of like the stops that the MTR, like the subways.
Oh yeah, for sure. 100%. I believe that because I'm from Bangladesh, right? Everyone is like there in like one little block, and it's like so hard to even get around, and there's transportation everywhere because there's so many people like with rickshaws and which are like cycles with like that people can ride on the back basically, and there's like also like natural gas vehicles that transport people. Like there's so much transportation that's there, and that's apparent in like all countries that are like that densely populated.
I could get on this subway and go anywhere. Like it just hit like everywhere I needed to go was within walking distance of like a subway.
That sounds like a dream.
And transferring was so easy. Yeah, I mean, because of the protests, they shut down early most nights. But other than that, it was very, very easy to get around, I found. Also, obviously I was there in the middle of a lot of like protest-related things. I mean, they're still going on too. But sometimes you'd like be on public transportation, and if you had your Bluetooth on, you just get like airdropped like an invitation to like the next protest that's in the area or something like that, which was kind of like an interesting way to, I guess, like spread that kind of information around. Like, I don't know how else I compare it. It was certainly more of like, I guess, like a collectivist culture in that, like, I remember when I had to go to the hospital, people just wore masks, not just to avoid getting sick themselves, but also in case, they were sick, they didn't want to get other people sick. And this was before COVID. So, we don't really have, I guess, that level of just like care for each other all the time back home. I mean, we have a pandemic right now, and it seems like even then a mask is too much to ask sometimes, I guess, for some people. But yeah, this and also just like the very united and organized push against the way that I guess China was overstepping in Hong Kong at the time was like a super big part of the experience.
How was that like experiencing the protests firsthand?
It was really interesting, and it's interesting to like look at now from Canada, because I mean, even as recent as like a few weeks or months ago, there's still like been big news. Like I know recently Canada suspended their extradition treaty with Hong Kong, and I think the U.S. Treasury also imposed sanctions on Carrie Lam, who's the chief executive for Hong Kong. And I know that recently in Hong Kong, they passed a national security law that actually basically said that the common phrase, which is liberate Hong Kong, revolution of our times, they deemed it separatist. And if you were wearing it on a shirt or carrying it on a flag, they would start arresting you. So that stuff is still going on. In terms of my experience with it, every once in a while you'd be out walking and you just kind of run into something, which was actually very interesting. It also happened on campus, especially at the end. I ended up getting, I had to leave campus because of it at a certain point. I remember I woke up, I shared a room with somebody, and we woke up and the AC unit was filtering tear gas into our room.
No way.
Oh, God.
So I was like, or he woke up and he like woke me up and he's like, Greg, I think there's tear gas in our room. My eyes are stinging a little bit. And I was like, no way. So we stayed on campus for like a day or two afterwards, and then we ended up just leaving and going to the hostel that my other friend was at. So that was very interesting. I remember like the residence buildings were decently tall, and the laundry machine was on the roof of them. And what would happen a lot of the times is protesters would go up to the roof of the building to shout like protest slogans down, and people from the ground would repeat them back up. So there was a few instances where I was like like just like in my pajamas, like taking the elevator to the roof to like do laundry or something, and I just end up getting in the elevator with just like a group of protesters, and I would just like chat with them and talk to them. They were always very nice to me.
Crazy experience.
Yeah, it was incredibly organized. That was
were you scared?
No, not really, to be honest. More so fascinated. It was like, I say fascinated as if I'm like looking at like an exhibit or something, which I guess is like not like
it's definitely different
because like these are like truly like people that are like actually like fighting for like their city and like to an extent for their lives as well. I was really impressed with how organized things were, given that there wasn't like this like, I guess like quote unquote leader. Like it's not like they had like, okay, the Hong Kong protest president is going to set an agenda. Like they just like moved as like a unit and did things in like a very organized way, which I thought was cool. I know like when things like started happening on my campus, each residence building seemed to like serve a purpose to some extent. So the protesters would mostly like post up on this bridge that was connecting campus to the residence buildings, and they'd like reinforce it, and my residence building was closest to that. So a lot of people would end up hanging out in it, and there was like a little like medical almost station set up in there for when people would come back from the bridge if like they got hit with a tear gas canister or something like that. My friend's residence building, which was across the, I guess, like horseshoe shape of residence buildings from mine, was being used to make like explosives and like Molotov cocktails. I know the building like two doors down from mine, they were building catapults, and then like the building next to that, the catapults, and the building next to that, they'd taken a jackhammer and they were removing bricks from the sidewalks to put in the catapults. It was like quite the production. It was very impressively coordinated and organized, and like
they're doing our physics project within 24 hours. Because I remember we made a catapult for one of our physics projects in class, and that took like at least a month or two. So they did it in 24 hours. Damn.
Mm-hmm. It's like really like, because like these people would be like afraid that like the place would just like bust in at any time, so they would sleep outside. Like a lot of the times they'd like sleep on like the bridge, which was like, it was just like pretty like respectable, to be honest, because I mean like
literally they're fighting.
That's like and that's like kind of like a big thing to stand up against is just
and standing up collectively too, like you said, a unit.
Yeah, I thought it was like very cool.
Yeah, I think you have a really interesting story to tell anyone, especially like your grandkids or something like when I was your age, I was in Hong Kong during the middle of this.
Yo, honestly, at this point, we all have an interesting story to tell, which is the pandemic. Let's be honest. What places do you recommend people visit when going to Hong Kong?
I spent a lot of time in TST, where my friend's hostel was. I really liked that area a lot. It was a lot of fun. There was a lot of things to do there. I would recommend just like walking around, checking out that area. I could say that about most areas too. Like Wan Chai as well was really cool. There's a couple cool like coffee shops I found in Wan Chai that I liked. I feel like a lot of like the cool things I did just like were wandering around and exploring. Like I think Soho is the best part. Yeah, there was one day where I went out with one of the friends I had, and we went up just like a series of escalators that were just like out like on the street. There was just like a bunch of escalators and stairs that went up, and we ended up in this area called Soho. That was pretty cool. Sometimes like you'd just like be wandering, and it really it felt like it was not possible to see the same street twice. So it's hard to just like recommend, I guess, a specific location.
I totally relate to you because when I went to Universal Studios in Florida, like my favorite part wasn't actually the rides that much. It was more so like during the nighttime, my parents were like, okay, just be back here by like 12 a.m. for the fireworks. And me and my friends, me and my family friends that we went with, basically just took the night to like go around the whole area of Universal Studios and go to like all the places that it's because it was like pure urban, pure like movie theater like stuff, and it was like it felt like we were on a movie set at night. And it was so fascinating just going around the little area. It's a very big area, but the area in general, just to like take photos and like explore and immerse yourself in the atmosphere. I feel like that's the best part when traveling. Just like immersing yourself in places that you want to explore, because that's the best part.
I certainly agree. I really did love Hong Kong as a city. I think it's like quite a shame to like see what China is doing to it right now, which is I just think that's super unfortunate, and I would love to go back, but I feel like right now going back it isn't, it like really isn't Hong Kong right now, like not just like in terms of like how China's handling things, but like also like quite literally the United States, I think Canada as well, have been like, we can no longer like separate China from Hong Kong. Like it truly has been just like, I think that's pretty unfortunate. It was such a cool city.
Mm-hmm. How was the food in general, and what was your favorite meal that you had in Hong Kong?
Probably one of the best places in Hong Kong. Not necessarily the best place in terms of like the food, but like if you're an exchange student, this was like the place to go. Was this place called Mr. Wong's, and you basically go, and it was like all you can eat, all you can drink, and it was roughly the equivalent of like $12.
No way.
And so you'd like sit down at this table, and Mr. Wong, the man himself, would come out with like a laundry basket, and he'd point you to the freezer, and you'd go fill it up with beer.
Wow.
And you'd come back and sit down at the table, and he'd just start bringing food. Like you didn't really order anything; he just kind of brought food. It wasn't like high quality food by any means. It was cheap for a reason, but it still like tasted good when you were hungry, and you've been drinking a lot of beer, so you just were just like, it's time to eat. He used to like, he would come out and he would like drink with you. He'd like do shots with the tables. He was like almost never sober when he was serving you. It was the place that a lot of exchange students went to. It was a lot of fun.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Very good time.
A laundry basket full of beer.
Like basically like laundry basket, or what are those like grocery baskets with like the two handles called, like that, and you just like fill it up and just take it back to your table. A lot of other like cool, I guess, dining experiences. The highest rooftop bar in the world, Ozone, is in Hong Kong as well, so we went there. The most expensive drinks I've ever bought, but a very, very cool view. It was like the 128th floor of this building, and it was in Central, so it like overlooked like the harbor and the mainland. Really, really cool view. They have like a signature cocktail that me and the friends I went with tried, which was really good. Also, like an amount of money that I would never spend on a single drink again, but I think it was worth it for the experience.
How much did you spend?
For that cocktail, it was like $60, I think.
$60 for a cocktail?
It was a lot.
Damn.
But like,
I don't know how expensive cocktails are. I've never
not $60.
drank, so.
I'll say that, not $60.
Not
but,
$60, yeah.
When you're like paying for that, it was also just like this like very like fancy, very cool rooftop bar, like 120 something floors up downtown, like right in the heart of like Hong Kong. So it's also just like the experience. So I didn't really have like a problem doing it like because of that. Like if I was drinking this in like a basement or something, I would have been like, no, I'll like find like a beer fridge or something.
Not a cold one.
I'll take water.
Yeah. So a lot of different like unique experiences. Overall, the food was very good.
Yeah, for sure. Sounds super
Sounds
cool,
awesome, honestly.
As a freelance art director, what projects are you interested in and look for?
I haven't freelance like art directed or like done freelance photography in a while. I used to do social media advertisements for company, which is, I mean, in part why I thought a university program that involved marketing would be good for me, I guess. I've honestly lost interest in that. It doesn't, that kind of stuff doesn't really interest me anymore. Currently I'm doing some work creating like album art and like EP artwork and single artwork for some people. Other than that, mostly like photography and art direction has just been like reserved for personal projects for now.
So we know that your passion for design photography is really big, but you also have an interest for like healthcare and the environment. How do you hope to combine these two interests together? So specifically healthcare, more as of late anyways, it's something that I've paid like a lot of attention to increasingly. I think what I love specifically about product design is the opportunity to solve like real problems, and frankly like as much as like my job title right now is product design, like we can drop like the label for a second and just think of it as like designing like systems or like solutioning, as vague and cliche as that might sound. I think the visual design part of product design is like a huge bonus. I love that a lot, but I think that like the core of what I really like doing is like figuring out how to solve problems, especially if they could be like systemic in origin. And I think that the way healthcare exists right now is really interesting. I think Canada gets like a lot of praise for its healthcare system, and it's not as messy as the United States' healthcare system is right now.
but it's, far from sustainable. And I think sustainable design in terms of like systems is a very interesting topic, right? You have like healthcare budgets right now in Canada that take up like half of the the provincial budget, sorry. And, that's not like a sustainable system. And I think like the idea of being involved in like a push for a more sustainable single payer healthcare system is very cool. Like, how can we balance like social and economic factors to create like this healthcare system that meets all of our current needs, but won't need to be sustained just by like pumping an increasing amount of money like we have to do in Canada right now. And I know like that's like very big in scope and like very general, like I want to make healthcare better. Like that's pretty like general. And I assume that the actual like restructuring of the system will be something that's left to like healthcare professionals and like policy experts and stuff like that. But I think that like working somewhere like local, on like a local level or within specific areas, I think working locally to improve the way healthcare is delivered would be like a goal or like something very cool to do. I know, like, for example, in Ottawa, when they rolled out the new digital health network here, called Epic, if you look it up, you'll see all sorts of articles about all the things that went wrong with it. You can see like all the different oversights and how it led to like longer wait times while things were adjusted, and like just like a whole slew of problems that just didn't seem to be considered in the first place. So I think even just beginning to solve these problems is a cool opportunity. But in general, like any way that I can be involved in healthcare with like product, with UX, with graphic design, I think would be like an ideal place for me to work. I just think it's very interesting. I think that it's arguably one of the most important things a country can get right, unless you have like some, like, I guess, like outdated neoliberal view of how a country should be run like the United States does. But like, that's, I guess, why my interest lies there. And I feel pretty similarly to like environment, although I haven't been like following that as much recently as I have healthcare, especially given, COVID as of late.
One thing that's interesting though, Greg, that what you mentioned, Lucy on like whenever, I think on episode 3, she mentioned that US is the only country to not have single payer healthcare system, and because of that, they're actually paying more than what most countries are actually paying for when they are doing a single payer healthcare system. It really opens your eyes of like how like the lengths people want to go to like customize like their healthcare plan and not just have like one entity that they could just follow and use that would be beneficial for all.
I think more and more people in the United States want a single-payer healthcare system. It's just more so the political parties that are...
Oh, yeah, that's true.
The two main options have too much money to lose if they introduce something like that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Something that we've seen consistently on our show with our guests is, and I know Rafid and I also experienced that, is imposter syndrome. Do you find yourself experiencing that, and how do you deal with it?
Yeah, from time to time. I think more so maybe like a year or two ago than now. I mean, like, I really did like stumble into UX. Like I mentioned, I didn't come into the program I'm in right now with like this like intention of just like being a good UX designer. I was like, let me take more photos, and then I found UX in my program, right? So like I'm like sitting in my like intro to UX design class in first semester. I didn't even know what it was. I couldn't have even defined it at that point. So to be working in like the place that I am now, working in like a fast-paced work environment, dealing with like real problems for like massive user groups, and like thinking back to like, like 3 years ago, I wouldn't have even been able to, define the role that I have right now, certainly does make you feel out of place sometimes. And like along the way, like working in like group projects at school with people who have clearly been interested in this much longer than you and are just generally more knowledgeable than you, and you like just, you fell into this program just by chance. You certainly do feel a bit like, am I like, what, how am I like, am I really keeping up with these people? A bit less now. I think I'm getting better with it. I think I've been taking when I feel that way as an opportunity to learn things from everyone. Like if I feel out of place, or if I feel like I truly am not on the level of like my coworkers or the students that I'm studying with, I try to learn why I'm thinking that and what areas I feel like I'm lacking in, and like take it as an opportunity to learn either from the internet or from the people around me what I feel like I need to learn to like feel like I'm on that level.
Yeah, I feel like it also comes from, being more confident in yourself, and the more you get experience into the world, the more you become comfortable.
Are there any last words or tips you have for the audience?
Especially if you're in like a design-based field, take a lot of time to make sure your portfolio is good. If you're writing UX case studies, make sure you're telling a story throughout the case study. Don't make it too wordy. I was involved in like the hiring process of the job I have right now for the next set of co-op students. I can say from experience, nobody wants to read like a 3,000 word case study that's about like a simple website redesign. Be concise, be able to tell a story, make it look good. Spend a lot of time, making sure that you have the portfolio pieces in place. You don't need to like stay up late and kill yourself doing it, but that is ultimately, especially for like design related fields, more important than a resume to an extent. It truly is. Just that is where your work is, and you could write like 3 bullet notes about your last job on your resume, but if you don't have anything tangible to show from it, you're going to get looked over a lot of the time. That
is great advice. Yeah, I'm pretty sure a lot of people who are especially like going into design, which you don't really have much, like a lot of students might not ever have that much experience with, like that's really great advice.
Yeah, it's important. I didn't have a portfolio coming out of high school. I had like a loose collection of photographs I'd taken, and I was like, this is my portfolio, but it was actually just like a folder on my hard drive. And it's just like, well, what am I going to do if I want to show this to somebody? Am I just going to like give this hard drive to them? Am I just going to like put these on like, Flickr or something, or Instagram, and be like, look, like setting like context and like telling a story with your work is like very important, and describing not just like, I made this button red, like why'd you make this button red, like what like led to that, like what lent itself to that decision, and just like being able to justify the design choices you've made, maybe not necessarily as specific as why the button was red, but in terms of like user flows. If you're doing UX design, for example, what lent itself to this decision of putting the flows in this order, and how did people respond to that when you tested, etc.
Telling a story, it sounds familiar. Juliana on episode 4, she studies fashion, and yeah, she was mentioning it. You gotta be able to tell a story through clothes.
Yeah, that's it. And if you're able to tell a story through UX design, like through like user journeys, you can almost like keep the users closer to you as you go through it. It's easier to keep them in mind if you're like developing stories as you go through a UX project.
Really cool. Thank you, Greg, for being on the show today. It was awesome having you on the podcast. You're very talented at what you do, and I recommend the audience check out your website and your IG. And yeah, speaking of the website, I found it very fun to scroll through, very interesting projects. Yeah, seriously. It was nice to hear about your program since it's not very common. And I hope students who are interested in design can take a few pointers from your journey.
Thank you both. I appreciate being on your podcast.
No worries. And you can definitely check Gregory Cotton on LinkedIn. His website is gregorykotton.ca, and his IG is greg.a.c. Everything will be in the description below, so you be sure to definitely check that out.
And of course, be sure to check us out on IG, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter at Capital Interns for all updates on our guests and episodes. And just by the way, this is episode 6 of the series. We're halfway through, so it is special. As well as listen to us on Google and Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
The next guest is a very, very extroverted and social engineering student. Probably the most social engineering student that I'll ever know. He goes to Ryerson University and is studying industrial engineering. Currently, he's doing an internship as a workforce management analyst at Walmart. Stay tuned as we delve into their career, internships, and personal life. Until next time. Bye.
Bye.
You really gotta go?
Come on, man. Nobody's forcing you to leave, you know. Wiping your slate clean ain't so easy. You see what